The whiskey burned a good going down. Not the fancy stuff the city boys drink, but honest liquor that reminds you you're alive. I swirled it in my glass, watching the amber liquid catch the dim light of Horn and Splinter, the bar that's been my second home for 30 years. Another round, Jim? Mike, the bartender, already knew the answer. He'd been pouring my drink since we both had full heads of hair. Make it a double, I said, feeling the weight of the day settling into my shoulders. 40 years in construction had left me with hands like weathered leather and a spine that complained more than a politician during tax season. The Horn and Splinter wasn't much to look at. Wood paneling from the 80s, neon beer signs that flickered when the AC kicked on, and the lingering smell of cigarettes that had seeped into every surface despite the smoking ban 8 years ago. But it was ours, a sanctuary for the men who built this town with their bare hands. I just finished my 3rd week of retirement, 3 decades as a construction foreman, building everything from the elementary school to the new courthouse. My reputation in Millfield was solid as the foundations I'd laid. People respected Jim Harmon, not because I demanded it, but because I'd earned it. "How's retirement treating you, Jim?" asked Pete, a Vietnam vet who occupied the same corner stool every night since his wife passed in '98. I shrugged, rolling my shoulders to ease the stiffness. "Still feels like I'm playing hooky. Keep waking up at 5 a.m., ready to head to a job site." "Give it time," Pete nodded. "Took me about 6 months to stop hearing that damn alarm in my head." The door swung open, letting in a blast of October air, and my wife, Barbara. Even at 52, she turned heads. Blonde hair expertly colored to hide the gray, a figure maintained through religious gym attendance, and that smile that still hit me in the chest after 30 years of marriage. "There's my handsome man," she said, sliding onto the stool beside me. Her perfume cut through the bar smell, something expensive from her salon. Barbara's beauty boutique had started as a small operation in our garage and grown into the most successful salon in 3 counties. Mike slid her usual white wine across the bar. "On the house, Barb. Heard you just signed the lease on that 2nd location?" Her eyes lit up. "Downtown Westridge. Triple the square footage of my current place. We break ground on renovations next month." I squeezed her hand. "Proud of you, honey." And I meant it. Barbara had built something impressive, even if her ambition sometimes felt like a third person in our marriage. "Jim's been helping me plan the layout," she said, though that wasn't entirely true. I'd nodded along to her ideas, offered a contractor's perspective when asked, but the salon was her domain. Always had been. The door banged open again, and the temperature in the room seemed to drop 10 degrees. Thomas Wilson strode in like he owned. The place designer shoes clicking against the worn wooden floor. 30-ish, with the kind of looks that come from good genes and better cosmetic dentistry. His suit probably cost more than most of the regulars made in a month. The bar quieted in that subtle way that happens when an outsider enters a close-knit place. Wilson had moved to town 6 months ago, buying up property and making noise about revitalization and untapped potential. To men like me, those were just fancy words for pushing out the working folks who'd been here for generations. He surveyed the room with the smug satisfaction of someone used to being the richest guy wherever he went. His eyes landed on our corner of the bar, and a smile spread across his face that didn't reach his eyes. "Well, if it isn't Millfield's power couple," he said, sliding onto the stool on Barbara's other side without being invited. "The builder and the beautician? How charmingly provincial." I felt my jaw tighten, but kept my expression neutral. I dealt with his type before. All talk, wrapped in expensive packaging. "Thomas," Barbara acknowledged with professional courtesy. They'd met when he'd come into her salon for a haircut last month. Since then, he'd become a regular, always scheduling with her directly. "Please, I've told you. Call me Tom," he signaled to Mike. "McAllen 18. Neat." Mike's expression didn't change as he poured the whiskey none of the regulars could afford. "So, Barb," Wilson continued, leaning closer to my wife than necessary, "have you considered my offer?" My ears perked up at this. Barbara shifted in her seat. "I told you, I'm not interested in investors right now. The expansion is happening on my terms." Wilson chuckled, a sound like expensive tires on gravel. "Business isn't about terms, darling. It's about opportunity. And right now you're missing a big one. My wife knows her business, I said quietly, making it clear this was the first and last warning he'd get about the darling comment. Wilson turned to me as if noticing me for the first time. His eyes flickered with something, amusement maybe, or contempt. No offense, old-timer, but beauty is a young person's game. Barbara here has talent, but without the right backing, she'll hit a ceiling. He sipped his whiskey. I've got connections in Chicago, New York, places where real money gets made. Barbara straightened her spine. I appreciate the interest, Tom, but I've built this business myself. The expansion is fully financed. Wilson leaned in, dropping his voice. Your woman belongs to a real man, old-timer. The bar went dead silent. Even the ancient jukebox in the corner seemed to hold its breath. Old Pete at the end of the bar set down his beer, and Dave stopped mid-pool shot. I stared at my whiskey, feeling the eyes of every man in the place on me. They were waiting to see if Jim Harmon still had it, if 30 years of respect meant anything when pushed. Jim, Barbara's voice had a warning edge. I looked up, meeting Wilson's eyes. What exactly do you mean by that? He smirked. Just that Barbara deserves someone who can match her ambition. Someone who understands the future, not the past. He gestured around the bar. This town is changing. Whether you dinosaurs like it or not, the smart ones will adapt. And the smart-mouthed ones? I asked, my voice low and steady. Wilson laughed. Come on, Harmon. You've had your time. Swinging hammers and pouring concrete. That's yesterday's game. Barbara needs someone who can take her national, maybe even international. What's your retirement plan? Drinking yourself to death in this dump? I felt something shift inside me. Not anger exactly, more like clarity. Tom, I said, using his name deliberately, let me give you some advice. Men who talk like you are usually compensating for something. In my experience, it's either an empty wallet or an empty character. Which is it for you? His face flushed. You don't know who you're dealing with. Actually, I think I do. I stood up slowly, feeling the old, familiar weight of certainty. You're the kind of man who measures his worth by what he owns, including other people, and you've mistaken my wife for something that can be bought. Barbara was watching me with a mixture of concern and something else. Pride, maybe. Wilson stood too, straightening his custom suit jacket. I've got a Harvard MBA and a net worth that would make your head spin, old man. What have you got? Calluses and a pension? I smiled then, which seemed to unnerve him more than if I'd thrown a punch. I've got something money can't buy, son. Something you wouldn't recognize if it bit you on your tailored ass. And what's that? He sneered. Integrity. I tossed back the rest of my whiskey. And the good sense to know that better men than you have tried to talk down to me and regretted it. Wilson's eyes narrowed. Is that a threat? Just an observation. I put my arm around Barbara's waist. My wife makes her own decisions. Always has. If she wants to do business with you, that's her choice. But don't ever mistake her professional courtesy for interest in whatever else you're selling. Barbara leaned into me, her hand finding mine. I think we're done here, Tom. I'll be returning your proposal unopened on Monday. Wilson's facade cracked for just a moment, revealing something ugly underneath. You're making a mistake, Barbara. Both of you. Wouldn't be our first, I said easily. Probably won't be our last. But it would be your first if you keep talking. The threat hung in the air, unspoken but clear. Wilson looked around, suddenly aware of the dozen pairs of eyes watching him. None friendly. He dropped a 50 on the bar. Keep the change, he said to Mike, trying to salvage some dignity. Some of you folks might need it soon enough. With that, he turned and walked out, the door swinging shut behind him. The bar exhaled collectively. Old Pete raised, his glass in my direction, and Mike slid fresh drinks in front of Barbara and me. What a jackass, Barbara muttered. I squeezed her hand. Want to tell me about this proposal? She sighed. He wants to buy in as a controlling partner. Says he can turn Beauty Boutique into a franchise operation. Keeps talking about leveraging the brand and aggressive expansion strategies. And you're not interested. She looked at me, really looked at me, the way she had when we were 20, and I just asked her to marry me. I built my business my way, Jim. Slow and steady, no debt, treating my employees right. His way means cutting corners, squeezing margins, treating people like numbers. That's not me. I nodded, feeling the tension drain from my shoulders. That's my girl. Beside, she added with a sly smile, I checked him out. For all his big talk, Thomas Wilson's last 3 ventures went belly up within 18 months. He's all flash, no foundation. I laughed. Barbara had always been the smarter of the two of us. So what now? Now, she said, clinking her glass against mine, we enjoy our drinks, go home, and forget about Thomas Wilson. If only it had been that simple. Monday morning, I was in our backyard, building the gazebo Barbara had been wanting for years. Retirement meant finally having time for all the home projects I'd put off. The October sun felt good on my back as I measured and cut. The familiar rhythm of work settling my mind. The sound of tires on gravel interrupted my concentration. Looking up, I saw Wilson's black BMW pulling into our driveway. He stepped out in another expensive suit, looking out of place against our modest ranch house. Barbara was at the salon, so I set down my saw and walked around to meet him, wiping my hands on my jeans. Wilson, this is a surprise. He surveyed my work with thinly disguised contempt. Keeping busy in retirement, I see. Something like that. What brings you by? He reached into his jacket and pulled out an envelope. I thought you might want to see this before I send it to Barbara. I didn't take it. Whatever you've got to say to my wife, you can say to her face. Oh, I think you'll want to see this privately first. He held out the envelope insistently. Against my better judgment, I took it and pulled out several glossy photographs. It took my brain a moment to process what I was seeing. Wilson and Barbara at what looked like a hotel restaurant, leaning close in conversation. Another showed them entering an elevator together, his hand on the small of her back. What the hell is this? I demanded, a cold feeling spreading through my chest. Wilson smiled, satisfaction oozing from every pore. Barbara and I had a private meeting last Thursday to discuss business opportunities. At the Westview Hotel in Ridgewood. He paused. Didn't she tell you? Last Thursday, the day Barbara had said she was meeting with suppliers for the new salon location. I stared at the photos, trying to make sense of them. These don't prove anything, I said, but my voice sounded hollow even to my own ears. Of course not, Wilson agreed smoothly. Just a business meeting. Although we did continue our discussion in my suite, the hotel restaurant was getting so crowded, I felt sick. What do you want, Wilson? His smile widened. Just for you to know your place, old man. Barbara's going places, with or without you. I'm offering her a partnership that will make her wealthy beyond what you could ever provide. The question is whether you'll stand in her way. Get off my property, I said quietly, fighting to keep my hands steady. He took the photos back, tucking them into his jacket. Think about it, Jim. 30 years is a long time. People change. Needs change. He pulled out a business card, placing it on my workbench. When you're ready to discuss this like businessmen, call me. I watched him drive away, the expensive car kicking up dust from our gravel driveway. Then I went inside and poured myself a drink, even though it wasn't even noon. The rational part of my brain said there could be an innocent explanation. Barbara was ambitious, yes, but she'd never given me reason to doubt her. 30 years of marriage meant something, but another part whispered darker thoughts. Barbara had been distant lately, working late, always on her phone. The expansion was consuming her, but was that all it was? Wilson was closer to her age than to mine. He could offer her things I couldn't. Connections, opportunities, excitement. I sat at our kitchen table, staring at nothing, until the sound of Barbara's car pulling in roused me. I quickly put away the whiskey glass and tried to compose myself. She bustled in, arms full of fabric samples and paint chips. Hey, honey! How's the gazebo coming? She dropped her things on the counter and came over to kiss me. I brought lunch from Sal's. Thought we could eat together since I have to go back for a 3 o'clock appointment. I searched her face looking for signs of deception, but saw only my wife of 30 years, excited about colors and textures for her new business. Wilson came by, I said, watching her closely. Her expression clouded immediately. What did he want? He showed me some pictures. You and him at the Westview Hotel last Thursday. Barbara went still. Jim, just tell me the truth, Barb. Whatever it is, I need to hear it from you. She sat down across from me, her face serious. I did meet with him Thursday. He said he wanted to show me some projections, market analyses for the beauty industry, things that might help with the expansion. At a hotel? In another town? She had the grace to look embarrassed. He suggested meeting somewhere neutral, away from local gossip. Said it would be more comfortable to talk freely. She reached for my hand. Nothing happened, Jim. We had lunch. He showed me his proposal. I told him I wasn't interested, and I left. Did you go to his room? Her eyes widened slightly. Yes, but only because he said he had the presentation materials there. We spent maybe 20 minutes looking at his laptop, and then I left. She squeezed my hand. That's all. I swear it. I wanted to believe her. God, I wanted to believe her. Why didn't you tell me? She sighed. Because I knew how you'd react. You've never liked him, and I didn't want to worry you over nothing. It was a business meeting that went nowhere. He doesn't see it that way. He's using those photos to suggest something happened between you two. Anger flashed across her face. That manipulative son of a... She stopped herself. Jim, you have to know I would never. Not with him, not with anyone. I nodded slowly. I know. And deep down I did. Barbara wasn't perfect, but she wasn't a liar. She came around the table and sat in my lap, the way she used to when we were young. That man is poison, Jim. I see that now. I'm sorry I didn't tell you about the meeting. I held her close, breathing in her familiar scent. It's okay, but from now on, no secrets, especially about Wilson. No secrets, she agreed, resting her head on my shoulder. We sat like that for a long time, the lunch from Sal's forgotten on the counter. The next morning I was back working on the gazebo when Dave from the Horn and Splinter pulled into our driveway. Dave wasn't the type to make social calls, especially at 9 a.m. Morning, Jim, he said, looking uncomfortable. Got a minute? I set down my hammer. What's up? Dave shifted his weight. There's something you should know. Wilson was back at the bar last night, running his mouth, saying things about Barbara. My stomach tightened. What kind of things? The kind that would get him knocked out if you'd been there. Dave looked genuinely pained. He was showing photos on his phone, hinting that him and Barbara... He trailed off. Photos from the hotel? I asked, my voice flat. Dave nodded. You knew about that? He showed me yesterday. What did Barbara say? She wasn't there. It was just us guys. Dave put his hand on my shoulder. Look, none of us believed it. We know Barbara. We know you. But Wilson's spreading this all over town. I thanked Dave for the heads up. After he left, I sat on the half-finished gazebo, trying to think through my options. My first instinct was to find Wilson and shut his mouth permanently. But that would only make things worse. Barbara didn't need her husband arrested for assault, on top of everything else. Instead, I called Ray, who'd retired from the sheriff's department 5 years ago. He agreed to meet me for coffee at the diner. This isn't just about his ego anymore, Ray said after I explained the situation. Sounds like he's trying to force Barbara's hand on this business deal by threatening her reputation. That's blackmail, I said. Ray nodded. Technically, yes, but hard to prove without recordings. And if you confront him directly, he'll just deny it. So what do? Let him smear my wife's name all over town? No, Ray said thoughtfully. You fight fire with fire. You want to know who Wilson really is? What he's really after? Let me make some calls. This type doesn't just appear out of nowhere. He's got a history somewhere. I agreed to let Ray dig into Wilson's background. In the meantime, I had to tell Barbara what was happening. She took it better than I expected. Let him talk, she said when I told her over lunch. People in this town have known me for decades. They know what kind of woman I am. But your business will be fine, she insisted. My clients are loyal. And the ones who'd believe Wilson's trash talk aren't the kind I want anyway. I admired her confidence, but I knew small towns. Rumors had a way of taking on a life of their own, regardless of truth. That afternoon, while Barbara was at the salon, I got a call from Ray. You're going to want to hear this, he said without preamble. Wilson's been running the same game in 3 different states. He finds successful small businesses, usually owned by women, tries to buy in as a partner, and when they refuse, he sabotages them until they're desperate enough to sell at rock-bottom prices. Son of a bitch, I muttered. It gets worse, Ray continued. He's got 2 lawsuits pending against him in Illinois, both sealed by the court, but my buddy in Chicago PD says they involve sexual harassment allegations from former business partners. Can we use this against him? Officially? Number. The cases are sealed for a reason, but unofficially? Might be worth letting Wilson know you're aware of his history. I thanked Ray and hung up, a plan already forming in my mind. That evening, Barbara came home looking drained. She poured herself a glass of wine and collapsed onto the couch beside me. Rough day? I asked. She nodded. 3 cancellations, all longtime clients. No explanations, just calls from their husbands saying they wouldn't be coming back. She took a long swallow of wine. And my main supplier called. They're reviewing our credit terms because of concerns about the business. Wilson? I said. It wasn't a question. Has to be. He's moving faster than I expected. She looked at me, worry creasing her forehead. Jim, this expansion is leveraged to the hilt. If I start losing clients or have to pay suppliers up front. I put my arm around her. I know what Wilson's game is. Ray did some digging. This isn't his first rodeo. He's done this before, spreading rumors, undermining credit, all to force business owners to sell out to him. Barbara's expression hardened. That bastard. I won't give him the satisfaction. You won't have to. I told her what Ray had discovered about the lawsuits. I'm going to have a chat with our friend Thomas. Man to man. She gripped my arm. Jim, be careful. This isn't some bar brawl. Wilson's dangerous in a different way. So am I said quietly. He just doesn't know it yet. The next day, I called Wilson from a payphone at the gas station. No need to let him have my cell number. Harmon, he answered, sounding smug. Finally ready to see reason? We need to talk, I said flatly. About Chicago. About those sealed lawsuits. There was a long pause. I don't know what you're talking about. I think you do. Meet me at the Westview Hotel. Noon tomorrow. Your territory, just like with Barbara. Another pause. Fine. The restaurant. Public place. Suits me, I said and hung up. When I got home, Barbara was waiting anxiously. Did you call him? I nodded. Meeting him tomorrow at the Westview. Don't worry, it'll be in the restaurant. Everything above board. She didn't look convinced. Jim, promise me you won't do anything stupid. Wilson's not worth going to jail over. I promise. This is just a conversation. I kissed her forehead. A conversation where I explain exactly what happens if he doesn't back off. The next day, I drove to the Westview Hotel in my best suit, the one I'd worn to our nephew's wedding last year. Not as expensive as Wilson's, but it sent a message. I could play his game when needed. He was waiting in the restaurant, looking like he owned the place. His confidence faltered slightly when he saw me. Not the retired construction worker he expected, but someone who looked like they belonged in his world. Harmon, he nodded as I sat across from him. Nice suit. Special occasion? You could say that. I placed a folder on the table between us. What's this? Insurance. He raised an eyebrow, then opened the folder. His face remained impressively neutral as he scanned the contents. Copies of the lawsuit documents Ray had somehow obtained. Financial records showing the collapse of his previous businesses. Statements from former associates describing his methods. Where did you get these? He asked quietly. Does it matter? What matters is who else might get them if you don't back off. He closed the folder, his eyes calculating. Blackmail doesn't suit you, Jim. Neither does watching my wife lose sleep over a snake like you trying to destroy her business. I leaned forward. Here's what's going to happen. You're going to call the bank today and tell them you were mistaken about Beauty Boutique's finances. You're going to contact every supplier and contractor you've poisoned against Barbara and fix the damage. Then you're going to leave town. Wilson laughed, but it sounded forced. Or what? You'll send these to the local paper? No one here cares about business disputes in Chicago. Not the paper, the SEC. the investors you defrauded, the business partners you screwed over. I've got names, numbers, and enough evidence to keep you tied up in litigation for years. I met his gaze steadily. You're not the only one with connections, Wilson. He stared at me, reassessing. I underestimated you. People usually do. It served me well. What's to stop me from denying everything? It would be your word against mine. I smiled. Then, and he flinched almost imperceptibly. That's the beauty of small towns, Wilson. People look out for each other. The bank manager's brother-in-law worked for me for 15 years. The permit office supervisor's son played on the baseball team I coached for 10 years. We take care of our own. His jaw tightened. You're bluffing? Try me. I stood up. You've got 48 hours to fix what you broke. After that, these files go to people who'll be very interested to find you. I left him sitting there staring at the folder. Walking through the hotel lobby, I felt lighter than I had in weeks. Wilson was a bully, and like most bullies, he crumbled when confronted with his own tactics. Barbara was waiting anxiously when I got home. Well? I think we've seen the last of Thomas Wilson's interference, I said, loosening my tie. She studied my face. What did you do? Just had a business discussion. The kind he understands. For 2 days, nothing happened. No calls from the bank. No suppliers suddenly changing their terms back. I began to wonder if Wilson had called my bluff after all. Then on the third morning, everything changed at once. Barbara got a call from the bank. The review of her loan had been completed, and everything was approved as originally agreed. By afternoon, her suppliers were calling to confirm orders, all payment terms back to normal. The permit office called to say all the paperwork was in order for the renovation to proceed on schedule. It was as if Wilson's campaign of sabotage had never happened. I don't know what you said to him, Barbara marveled as we celebrated with champagne that evening. But it worked. I just smiled. Let's just say he realized his business model wasn't suited to our town. We thought that was the end of it. We were wrong. 2 days later, I was at the Horn and Splinter with Ray, enjoying a quiet beer and game of pool, when Wilson walked in. He looked different, disheveled, eyes bloodshot, expensive suit wrinkled as if he'd slept in it. He spotted me immediately and headed over, ignoring the hostile stares from the regulars. You think you've won, he slurred, clearly drunk. You think you're so damn clever. I set down my pool cue. You're drunk, Wilson. Go home. Home? He laughed, a harsh, bitter sound. I don't have a home here anymore. My investors pulled out this morning, called in their markers. Seems someone sent them some very interesting information about my business practices. I kept my expression neutral, though this wasn't my doing. I had given him 48 hours as promised and hadn't leaked anything to his investors. Sounds like karma to me, Ray commented from beside me. Wilson ignored him, focusing his bloodshot glare on me. You'll regret this, Harmon. Both of you will. That's enough, Mike called from behind the bar. Time for you to leave, Wilson. Or what? Wilson sneered. You'll throw me out, old man. Mike reached under the bar, where everyone knew he kept a baseball bat for trouble. Last warning, I said quietly to Wilson. Walk away while you still can. Something in my tone must have penetrated his alcohol-fogged brain. He looked around, seeming to realize for the first time that he was surrounded by people who'd known and respected me for decades. This isn't over, he muttered, but he turned and stumbled toward the door. I exchanged looks with Ray. Think he's a problem? Ray shrugged. Nothing we can't handle if he is. I wanted to believe that, but a cold feeling in my gut told me Wilson wasn't done causing trouble. I was right. That night, a little after midnight, our phone rang. Barbara answered, then handed it to me, her face pale. It's the police, she whispered. Officer Daniels, a young cop I'd known since he was a boy, was apologetic but firm. There's been a fire at the new salon location, Mr. Harmon. They're still fighting it, but it looks bad. We dressed quickly and drove to the site. The scene was chaos. Fire trucks, flashing lights, and the acrid smell of smoke hanging in the air. The building that was supposed to house Barbara's dream was engulfed in flames. Chief Warren approached as we got out of the car. Jim, Barbara, I'm sorry. Barbara stared at the burning building, tears streaming down her face. How bad is it? Total loss, I'm afraid. Fire started in multiple locations. Definitely arson. I put my arm around Barbara's shoulders. Wilson, the chief nodded grimly. That's our thinking too. Witnesses saw a man matching his description near the building about an hour before the fire was reported. We've got officers looking for him now. Barbara turned to me, her expression shattered. Everything was in there, Jim. All the new equipment, the custom fixtures, everything I ordered for the opening next month. Was it insured? I asked, already knowing the answer. Barbara was too smart a businesswoman not to have insurance. Yes, but she shook her head. It's not just the money. It's the time. Even with insurance, it'll take months to replace everything. Find a new location. The momentum is gone. I held her as she cried, watching her dream turn to ashes before our eyes. And in that moment, I made a decision. Wilson had to pay, not just legally, but personally. It took 3 days for the police to find him. He'd holed up in a motel 2 towns over, apparently planning to skip out on his lease and other obligations. They arrested him for arson, but with his resources, I knew he'd make bail quickly. I was right. Less than 24 hours after his arrest, Wilson was out, awaiting trial. The evidence was circumstantial, enough for an arrest but not a slam-dunk conviction. Barbara threw herself into dealing with the insurance company and looking for another location, but her heart wasn't in it. The fire had done more than destroy a building. It had broken something in her spirit. Maybe this is a sign, she said one night as we sat on our porch, watching the sunset. Maybe I was reaching too high. Don't talk like that, I said fiercely. Wilson doesn't get to win. Not like this. She looked at me with tired eyes. He already has, Jim. The insurance will cover the losses eventually, but my suppliers have lost faith. Half my staff is looking for other jobs because they can't wait months for the new location. And honestly, I don't know if I have the energy to start over. Her words hit me like a physical blow. Barbara had never been one to give up. For Wilson to have beaten her down this way was unforgivable. The next day, I made some calls, pulling in favors from people I'd worked with over the decades. By evening, I had what I needed. Wilson's new temporary address and his daily routine. I didn't tell Barbara what I was planning. Some things were better kept between a man and his conscience. I waited 3 days, watching Wilson's movements, learning his patterns. He was staying in a rental house on the edge of town, apparently believing himself safe now that he was out on bail. On the 4th day, I made my move. It was dusk when I parked down the street from Wilson's rental. I waited until the lights came on inside, then walked up to the front door and knocked. Wilson opened the door, surprise registering on his face when he saw me. Harmon? What the hell? I didn't give him time to finish. My fist connected with his jaw, sending him stumbling backward into the house. I followed, closing the door behind me. What the? He touched his split lip, staring at the blood on his fingers. Are you insane? I'll have you arrested for assault. To do that, you'd have to admit I was here, I said calmly, removing my jacket and rolling up my sleeves. And we both know you won't do that, because then you'd have to explain what we talked about. Understanding dawned in his eyes. This is about the fire. I didn't save it, I advanced on him. You took something from my wife, her dream, her confidence, her belief in herself. He backed away. The police have nothing concrete. You can't prove anything. This isn't about proof, Wilson. This is about consequences. He looked around desperately, perhaps for a weapon or an escape route. I'll pay for the damages. Whatever the insurance doesn't cover. Just be reasonable. Reasonable? I laughed, a sound without humor. Was it reasonable to burn down a building because your ego got bruised? Was it reasonable to try to destroy a woman's life's work because she wouldn't do business with you? He made a break for it then, trying to dart past me to the door. I caught him easily. Decades of construction work giving me strength his gym-sculpted muscles couldn't match. I threw him against the wall, pictures crashing to the floor. Your woman belongs to a real man, I repeated his words from the bar. Remember saying that, Wilson? Fear flashed in his eyes. Look, that was just talk. I was trying to get under your skin. It worked. I hit him again, feeling something crack beneath my knuckles. But you made a mistake. You assume because I was older, because I worked with my hands, that I was somehow less than you, that I wouldn't know how to fight back. Wilson slid to the floor, blood streaming from his nose. Please, he whimpered. No more. I crouched in front of him. Here's what's going to happen. You're going to plead guilty to the arson. You're going to make full restitution to my wife's business, not just for the physical losses, but for the lost time and opportunity. You're going to write a public apology admitting what you did and why, and then you're going to leave this town and never come back. He stared at me, hate and fear warring in his eyes. And if I don't? I smiled and he flinched. Then next time, I won't stop with a few bruises and a broken nose. They'll be counting your teeth before I'm done. Something in my voice or my eyes must have convinced him I meant every word. He nodded slowly. I'll do it, he whispered. Just leave me alone. I stood up. You've got 24 hours to contact the DA and make arrangements. If you don't, I'll be back. I picked up my jacket. And Wilson? If you ever come near my wife or her business again, there won't be enough left of you to identify. I walked out, leaving him bleeding on the floor of his rented house. The next morning, Barbara got a call from the district attorney's office. Wilson had confessed to the arson and agreed to make full restitution. He'd also withdrawn his statement to the police, claiming I had assaulted him the previous evening. When Barbara told me the news, she studied my face carefully. Jim, what did you do? What makes you think I did anything? She touched my bruised knuckles gently. 30 years of marriage, that's what. I sighed. Let's just say Wilson and I came to an understanding about the proper way to do business in this town. She didn't press for details and I didn't offer any. Some things were better left unspoken between husband and wife. Wilson's confession and restitution agreement made the front page of the local paper. The details were vague, just that he'd admitted to starting the fire and agreed to pay damages. But it was enough to restore Barbara's reputation in town. The clients who'd canceled started calling for appointments again. Suppliers who'd been hesitant renewed their commitments. But the damage to Barbara's expansion plans was done. The building was a total loss, and by the time the insurance money came through, the commercial real estate market had tightened. There were no suitable locations available. We'll wait, I assured her. The right place will come along. She nodded, but I could tell her heart wasn't in it anymore. The fire had taken more than just a building. It had stolen her momentum, her excitement for the future. Wilson, meanwhile, was preparing for sentencing. The DA had pushed for the maximum, 5 years for felony arson. But his high-priced lawyer was arguing for probation and restitution only, citing his cooperation and clean prior record. The morning of the sentencing hearing, Barbara and I were having coffee on the porch when a car pulled into our driveway. Not Wilson's BMW, but a modest sedan I didn't recognize. A middle-aged woman stepped out looking nervous. Mr. and Mrs. Harmon, I'm Patricia Lawson, Thomas Wilson's former business partner. Barbara and I exchanged glances. What can we do for you, miss? Lawson? Barbara asked. Patricia fidgeted with her purse strap. I read about what happened to your salon, about Wilson confessing to the arson. And she took a deep breath. I need to tell you something. Something that might help ensure he gets the sentence he deserves. We invited her inside. Over coffee, Patricia told us her story, how Wilson had approached her thriving interior design business in Chicago with promises of expansion and growth, how he'd gradually undermined her client relationships and credit standing when she refused to give him controlling interest, and ultimately, how he'd threatened her personally when she tried to expose him. I filed a lawsuit, she explained, but he countersued for defamation, dragged things out until I couldn't afford to continue. I ended up settling with a non-disclosure agreement. That's why the court records are sealed. But you're breaking that NDA now, I observed. She nodded grimly. Yes, because if I'd spoken up sooner, maybe he wouldn't have been able to do the same thing to you, Mrs. Harmon, and I'm tired of being scared. Barbara reached across the table and squeezed Patricia's hand. It's not your fault. And please, call me Barbara. Patricia smiled weakly. There's more. Wilson didn't just try to sabotage my business. When that didn't work fast enough, there was a break-in at my studio. Nothing valuable was taken, but all my client files were destroyed. My computer was smashed. The parallels to Barbara's situation were unmistakable. Did you report it? I asked. Of course. But there was no evidence linking Wilson to the crime. Just like your fire, I imagine, if he hadn't confessed. I leaned forward. Would you be willing to tell this to the judge? Today at Wilson's sentencing? She hesitated, then squared her shoulders. Yes. It's time someone stopped him for good. 3 hours later, we sat in the courtroom as Patricia testified during the victim impact portion of the sentencing. She wasn't the only one. 2 other women had come forward, former business associates of Wilson's from different states, each with a similar story: break-ins, vandalism, mysterious fires that couldn't be traced back to him. Wilson's face grew paler with each testimony. His lawyer tried to object, arguing that these unproven allegations from other jurisdictions weren't relevant to the current case, but Judge Henderson, whose daughter had been one of Barbara's first employees, overruled him. I find these testimonies highly relevant to establishing a pattern of behavior and assessing the defendant's potential for rehabilitation, the judge said firmly. When it came time for sentencing, Judge Henderson didn't mince words. Mr. Wilson, you've pled guilty to arson in the first degree, a Class B felony in this state. The standard sentence range is 2 to 5 years. Your attorney has argued for probation, citing your confession and willingness to make restitution. He peered over his glasses at Wilson. However, based on the testimony we've heard today, I believe you represent an ongoing danger to the community. Your pattern of targeting successful women business owners and using both legal and illegal means to destroy what they've built shows a disturbing level of premeditation and malice. Wilson stared straight ahead, his jaw clenched. Therefore, I sentence you to the maximum term of 5 years in the state penitentiary, with no possibility of parole for 3 years. Additionally, you will make full restitution to Mrs. Harmon for all damages, both direct and consequential, resulting from your crime. The gavel came down with a satisfying crack. As the bailiff led Wilson away, he turned and looked directly at me, his eyes promising revenge. I met his gaze steadily, unafraid. Outside the courthouse, Barbara hugged Patricia and the other women who testified. Thank you, she said, tears in her eyes. All of you, for making sure he can't do this to anyone else. Patricia smiled. It's what should have happened years ago. Maybe now we can all move forward. As we walked to our car, Barbara slipped her hand into mine. 5 years, she said. It doesn't bring back my salon location, but it's something. It's justice, I replied, and sometimes that's enough. But it wasn't the end of our story with Thomas Wilson, not by a long shot. 2 weeks later, I was reading the morning paper when a small article caught my eye. Wilson had been attacked in prison, suffering multiple facial fractures and the loss of several teeth. No suspects had been identified. I showed the article to Barbara, who read it with a mixture of horror and satisfaction. They're counting his teeth now, she murmured, echoing my threat to Wilson. Nothing to do with me, I said truthfully. Prison justice has its own rules. She gave me a long look. I know that, just like I know you wouldn't have really hurt him that badly. You're not that kind of man, Jim. I didn't correct her. In that moment with Wilson in our house, seeing the fear in Barbara's eyes when she talked about giving up her dreams, I might have been exactly that kind of man. But some truths were better left unexamined. A month after Wilson's sentencing, Barbara received an unexpected phone call. Walter Reynolds, the owner of the Millfield Plaza, the prime retail location in town, wanted to meet with her. He's retiring, she told me after the call, wants to sell the entire plaza, says he'd like to discuss it with me before listing it publicly. The Millfield Plaza was a small but upscale shopping center that housed the town's best boutiques and restaurants. Barbara had always said it would be the perfect location for her salon, but space there never came available. Can we afford something like that? I asked. The insurance money from the fire would cover rebuilding a salon, but buying an entire shopping plaza was a different league. Probably not, she admitted, but I'm curious why he called me first. The meeting with Reynolds revealed the surprising answer. He'd been following the saga with Wilson closely and had been impressed by how Barbara had handled herself through the ordeal. This town needs more business owners like you, Barbara, he said as we sat in his office overlooking the plaza. People who build things the right way, who treat their employees and customers with respect. I've watched you grow that salon from nothing, never cutting corners, always doing things right. He named his asking price for the plaza, a fair figure, but still well beyond what we could afford, even with the insurance money and our savings combined. I can't swing that, Barbara said regretfully, but I'd be very interested in leasing space for the new salon, if that's an option. Reynolds smiled. Actually, I had something else in mind. A partnership. You'd run your salon in the anchor space and gradually take over management of the entire plaza. We'd split the profits 60-40 for 5 years. Then you'd have the option to buy me out completely. Barbara's eyes widened. That's incredibly generous. But why? Because I've spent 40 years building this place, and I want to see it in good hands when I retire. Hands that understand what it means to build something real, not just turn a quick profit. He looked at me. Jim's reputation in this town is part of it too. You two represent what Millfield is about. Hard work, integrity, looking out for each other. The irony wasn't lost on me. Wilson had tried to force a predatory partnership on Barbara, and now she was being offered a genuine opportunity for growth on fair terms. We need to review the financials, the lease agreements with the current tenants, Barbara said, already thinking like a property manager. Reynolds laughed. Of course. Take your time, do your due diligence. The offer stands. 3 months later, Barbara's new salon opened in the Millfield Plaza, twice the size of her original location, with a day spa section that attracted clients from 3 counties. The partnership with Reynolds was working beautifully, with Barbara bringing fresh energy and ideas to the plaza management. On the day of the grand opening, I stood beside her as she cut the ribbon, her smile radiant, her confidence fully restored. The salon was packed with well-wishers, many of whom had helped us rebuild after the fire, offering temporary space for her stylists, helping with the renovation of the new location, spreading the word about the grand opening. We did it, she whispered to me as camera flashes popped around us. You did it, I corrected her. This is all you, Barb. She squeezed my hand. No, it's us. Always has been. She looked around at her beautiful new salon, at the community that had rallied around us. Wilson never understood that. He thought business was just about money and power. And what is it about? I asked, curious to hear her answer. She smiled up at me, the same smile that had captured my heart 30 years ago. Relationships, trust, building something that lasts. She kissed me softly, the same things that make a marriage work. That evening, as we celebrated at home with champagne, Barbara raised her glass in a toast. To karma, she said, and to men who don't need to announce they're real men. I clinked my glass against hers. And to women who know the difference. We drank, and I thought about Wilson, sitting in his prison cell, counting his remaining teeth. I almost felt sorry for him. Almost. In the end, he'd been right about one thing. Barbara did belong with a real man. He'd just been wrong about who that man was. And while he counted his teeth in prison, Barbara counted the zeros in her business account, which had never looked healthier. A year later, we received word that Wilson had been denied parole. The board cited his lack of genuine remorse and continuing failure to accept responsibility for his actions. Apparently, despite his guilty plea, he'd spent his time in prison claiming he'd been framed, that I had somehow orchestrated everything to destroy him. Some people never learn, Barbara commented when I told her the news. Some people can't, I replied. They're too invested in their own version of reality to see the truth. 2 more years passed. The plaza was thriving under Barbara's management. She'd brought in new tenants, renovated the common areas, and created a cohesive shopping experience that drew people from neighboring towns. Reynolds had begun talking about accelerating the timeline for her to buy him out completely. Then one ordinary Tuesday, I was in our backyard, finally putting the finishing touches on the gazebo that had been interrupted by Wilson's arrival in our lives years before. The sound of tires on gravel made me look up, expecting Barbara home early from work. Instead, I saw a man I barely recognized walking toward me. Thinner, harder, with a face that showed evidence of poor dental work, but unmistakably Thomas Wilson. I set down my hammer standing to my full height. You're violating your parole by being here, Wilson. He stopped a safe distance away. Worth it to see you face to face, Harmon. I've had a lot of time to think about you, about what you did to me. What I did to you, I shook my head in disbelief. You tried to destroy my wife's business. You burned down a building. You got exactly what you deserved. Did I? His voice was eerily calm. Maybe, maybe not. But here's what I know for sure. You're not the only one who can dig up dirt, old man. I've got friends on the outside, friends who've been looking into you. I laughed. There's nothing to find, Wilson. I've lived my whole life in this town. People know who I am. Do they? He smiled, revealing gaps where teeth should have been. Do they know about Tampa? 1986? My blood ran cold. Tampa, a name and a date I'd buried so deep I sometimes convinced myself it had never happened. I don't know what you're talking about, I said, but my voice lacked conviction. I think you do. Wilson's smile widened. A construction site accident, a young worker killed, an investigation that found negligence by the foreman, one James Harmon, but mysteriously disappeared before charges could be filed. I stared at him, struggling to keep my expression neutral. That was ruled an accident. I was cleared. Were you? Or did you just run back to your hometown where Daddy had connections with the local police? Wilson took a step closer. I've got copies of the original investigation reports, Harmon. The ones that never made it to court, the ones that show you falsified safety records, that you knew the equipment was faulty but kept the job going to meet a deadline. My mind raced. No one knew about Tampa. I'd left Florida and never looked back. Changed jobs, started fresh. Even Barbara didn't know the full story. What do you want, Wilson? Justice, he said simply. The same thing you claim to want for your wife. I want the world to know who Jim Harmon really is. Not the respected businessman, but the man who let a 22-year-old die because fixing a safety issue would have cost too much time and money. I felt sick. The memories I'd suppressed for decades came flooding back. Joey Martinez's face, his mother's screams at the funeral, the weight of guilt I'd carried every day since. That was a different life, I said quietly. A different man. Was it? Wilson's eyes gleamed with triumph. Or have you just been pretending all these years, playing the role of the Honorable Jim Harmon, while knowing what you really are? I looked at the ground, unable to meet his gaze. What do you want from me? I want you to feel what I felt, to have everything taken away, your reputation, your wife's respect, your place in this community. Why now? After all this time? Wilson laughed bitterly. Because in prison, all you have is time. Time to plan, to investigate, to find the perfect leverage. He pulled an envelope from his jacket and tossed it onto my workbench. Copies of everything I have. The original accident report, witness statements, the works. I've got someone ready to send this to your local paper, the DA's office, and Barbara if anything happens to me. I stared at the envelope, knowing my life as I knew it was contained inside. So what's the play here, Wilson? Blackmail? He shook his head. No, I just wanted to see your face when you realized you're no better than me, that your moral high ground was built on quicksand. He backed away, heading toward a car I hadn't noticed parked down the street. Sleep well, Harmon. Knowing your wife is married to a fraud, I watched him drive away, the envelope sitting on my workbench like a ticking bomb. That night, Barbara noticed something was wrong. You've been quiet all evening, she said as we got ready for bed. Everything okay? I looked at her, my wife of 35 years, the woman who thought she knew everything about me. Just tired, I lied. Long day. She studied my face. Jim, you know you can tell me anything, right? In that moment, I almost did. Almost told her everything. About Tampa, about Joey Martinez, about Wilson's visit. But I couldn't bear to see the look in her eyes when she realized who I really was. I know, I said instead, kissing her forehead. Just need some sleep. For a week, I carried the weight of Wilson's threat, jumping every time the phone rang, scanning the local paper for any mention of Tampa. I couldn't eat, couldn't sleep. Barbara grew increasingly concerned, but I brushed off her questions. Then one evening, as we were having dinner, she set down her fork and looked at me squarely. Thomas Wilson came to see me today, she said. The bite of food in my mouth turned to ash. What? At the salon? Just walked in during my lunch break. Wanted to talk to me about you. My heart pounded. What? What did he say? He tried to tell me some story about you being responsible for a worker's death in Florida years ago. Said he had proof you covered it up. Her eyes never left mine. Said he thought I should know who I was really married to. I couldn't speak, couldn't move. I told him to get out before I called his parole officer. Barbara continued calmly. Then I called you. 3 times. You didn't answer. I was working in the backyard, I managed. Didn't hear the phone. So I called Ray, she went on as if I hadn't spoken. Asked him to look into this Tampa story. He got back to me about an hour ago. My throat was so dry I could barely swallow. Barbara, there was an accident, she said. A young worker died. You were the foreman. The initial investigation found possible negligence. She paused. But the final report cleared you completely. The equipment failure was traced back to the manufacturer, who settled with the family. You left Florida a month later. I stared at her, trying to process what she was saying. Ray found all that? He's still got connections in law enforcement, she said with a shrug. But here's what I want to know, Jim. Why didn't you ever tell me about this? The question hung in the air between us. After all these years, after everything we'd been through together, here was the moment of truth. Because I was ashamed, I said finally, my voice barely above a whisper. Not because I was negligent. I wasn't. I checked that equipment myself the day before. But because I was in charge. Joey was my responsibility, and I failed him. Barbara reached across the table and took my hand. That's not failure, Jim. That's an accident, a tragedy. I couldn't save him, I said, the words I'd never spoken aloud finally escaping. I tried. God, I tried. But by the time we got him out from under that beam, I trailed off, the memory too painful. So you left Florida, started over here. I nodded, changed jobs, went back to being just a worker for a while, not a foreman. Couldn't handle the responsibility anymore. Until you met me, Barbara said softly. Until I met you, I agreed. You made me want to be better. To try again. She squeezed my hand. Wilson thought he could use this to drive us apart, to make me see you differently. And does it? I asked, afraid of the answer. Barbara's eyes filled with tears. It makes me love you more, you idiot. To know that you've carried this weight all these years, that you've held yourself to such an impossible standard because of something that wasn't your fault. The relief that flooded through me was so intense I could barely breathe. I should have told you. Yes, you should have, but I understand why you didn't. She wiped her eyes. No more secrets, Jim. Not after all this time. No more secrets, I promised. Later that night, I called Ray to thank him for looking into the Tampa incident. There's something else you should know, he said. Wilson violated his parole by coming to see you and Barbara. He's been picked up, going back to finish his sentence, plus probably another year for the violation. Good, Arnason, I said, feeling a weight lift from my shoulders. That's good. Jim, Ray hesitated. For what it's worth, I always knew about Tampa. Did a background check on you when you first started dating Barbara. Her dad asked me to. I was stunned. You knew? All this time? Known you 35 years, Jim. Known about Tampa for just as long. Never changed my opinion of you one bit. He cleared his throat. Accidents happen. It's what you do after that defines you. After we hung up, I went outside and looked at the finished gazebo, glowing softly in the moonlight. Barbara had waited years for it, through all our ups and downs with Wilson. Through my procrastination and distraction, she'd never complained. Just waited patiently, believing I'd finish it eventually, believing in me. I heard the door open behind me, felt Barbara's arms slip around my waist. It's beautiful, she murmured. Worth the wait. I turned to face her. I don't deserve you. She laughed softly. Probably not. But you've got me anyway. She kissed me, then took my hand and led me toward the gazebo. Come sit with me. Let's enjoy this thing you built. As we sat together in the cool night air, I thought about Wilson, back in his prison cell, counting teeth and plotting revenge that would never come. And I thought about Joey Martinez, whose death had shaped my life in ways I'd never fully acknowledged. I'm going to find Joey's family, I said suddenly. Make sure they're okay. That the settlement was enough. Barbara nodded against my shoulder. I think that's a good idea. We could do it together. I'd like that, I said, pulling her closer. We sat in comfortable silence, looking up at the stars through the gazebo roof. After a while, Barbara spoke. You know what Wilson never understood? About you, about us, about this town. What's that? That real strength isn't about power or money or intimidation. It's about facing your mistakes, making things right when you can, and living with grace when you can't. I thought about that, about Tampa and Wilson and all the years between, about the man I'd been and the man I'd become. He'll have plenty of time to figure it out now, I said. Barbara chuckled. Somehow I doubt prison is teaching him anything except how to be a better criminal. His loss, I said simply. We fell silent again, content in each other's company, secure in the knowledge that we'd weathered Wilson's storm and emerged stronger. And if Wilson was counting his teeth in prison, well, Barbara was counting the zeros in her account, and I was counting my blessings.